Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Open Peace podcast. It's a real pleasure to be joined tonight by Matt Keston, who is an Oleh Hadash. For you, those who don't know what an Oleh Hadash is, it means a new immigrant to Israel, from my hometown, from London. Matt, how's it been coming and moving over to Israel from the UK? How have you found it?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Amir. Lovely to be here
pleasure.
on the podcast. How's it been? It's been wonderful. Is the honest answer. For a number of reasons, I've absolutely loved it. Best decision of my life for sure.
Wow, that's really great to hear. And when did you make the move, roughly, so I can get
I made the move almost three years ago now. So I'm not such an Oleh Hadash anymore. But to be honest, I feel like I only had 1 year of like real Israel, and then of course a year and a couple of months, and then COVID came. So I felt like I kind of had 1 year and I hadn't really got so started yet.
I see what you mean. Yeah, it really sucks that COVID hit at that time. Hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, we're going to get back on the right track soon, and everything will be open and tourism will be flowing again, and the tourists will be coming in to see the beautiful land of Israel.
Hope so.
I was just wondering, as an Oleh myself, a bit of a different situation, because I was born in Israel, moved to the UK as a baby, and then came back at 18, left for a few years, and I actually came back 3 years ago as well, roughly, for the second time. So what are some of the positive things that you found about moving from the UK to Israel in terms of the society over here?
Oh, well, you feel like it's very hard to explain this, but when you're here, you feel very much like you're home and it's safe. You feel like you can walk around, you can walk around Tel Aviv, most parts of Tel Aviv, okay? I'm generalizing, but the most parts of Tel Aviv, you walk around, you feel very safe. You don't feel like anything's going to happen. You walk around in London, and in some parts, in a lot of parts, you feel like a lot of the time you have to cross the roads, because you never know if you're going to be victim to any sort of attack. Anti-Semitism's became a real bad problem as I left and as you came back, with Jeremy Corbyn kind of making it feel like it was acceptable to be anti-Semitic. And so coming here, I guess that's one big thing about coming here that I don't miss at all about London, that I love here.
Oh, I completely feel you on that. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I'll say it again. My mum once was driving through Hendon. I'm sure you're aware of the area. And she had to pull 6 or 7 teenage boys from kicking the living crap out of an ultra-Orthodox Jew. And this was just in broad daylight. And that's just one type of example of anti-Semitism that goes on, unfortunately, in London, and it's actually widespread. It goes on in New York, it goes on in LA, it goes on in many other places across the world. It's a real shame and a blight on humanity, if you're asking me. And even more than that, racism in general, when it's directed to anyone, any form of free hate and racism, to me is a real problem. And it's part of the reason that we're doing this podcast, to try and get people who maybe have differing views and maybe negative views about certain groups of people to really see that there's humans behind the other side. We also have a problem, I'd say, with racism within Israeli society, unfortunately. There is some hate towards our Palestinian cousins out there, unfortunately, although I don't think it's as widespread as anti-Semitism is in the world. Having said that, none of it is good. So one thing I was wondering about, you made the move 3 years ago. Was it something that you thought about before then, or was it a spur of the moment kind of thing?
No, it was something that I'd been building up, thinking about. A lot of my jobs before I moved to Israel, a lot of my jobs involved the Jewish community. Helping Jewish students was most of my life for the 8 years prior, on campuses up and down the UK. And so I specifically was around hate very regularly because I was doing a job where I had to face it and help students. And as many of your audience, I'm sure, know, the university situation in the UK is generally quite bad for Jewish students on campus, and Israel especially, and the two often get mixed into one, which of course is a separate debate in itself of whether that's good or bad. So with all that been done, I felt like it was time to make the move here myself. And I think I did it I feel like I did it at the right time, once I'd really kind of given my service. You know, I was never in the IDF. I never did that, but what I did do is as big a service I could for Israel when I lived in England.
I see. You played your part, and I just want to thank you for that. And I also saw you happened to arrange a football match, right, between Israelis and Afghanis. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, funny story. I'll give you a funny story. I did work in the Israeli embassy, okay? And there was no, I thought it would be really nice to bring the countries together, all the different embassies together, maybe bring people together, especially working in the Israeli embassy. I thought, maybe we can get somewhere towards peace in England via the UK, by bringing countries together that maybe in usual circumstances wouldn't play against each other. And so I can say it now because I've left, but I set up another email account and just said I was Matt from a kind of made up football association, and reached out to all the embassies across the United Kingdom, but they're all pretty much based in London, right? So, and I messaged them all and said, who wants to play in a football tournament? And to cut a long story short, we got a load of teams from a load of different embassies, and Afghanistan played, who of course don't have any relations with Israel. They don't have diplomatic relations. And Afghanistan agreed to play against Israel. And we got a picture, which I think is maybe what you saw, of the two flags next to each other at the end of the game, even after Israel had won the game. I think it was 8-5. It was an 8-a-side tournament. They still stayed at the end and took the picture of us. And that was a nice moment for me. And yeah, that was a big moment, and just proves that with all the stuff going on in the world and with all the hate, sport can bring people and countries and religion and faiths together.
100%. I completely agree with you, and I don't think there's any sport that unites people more than football. It is the most popular sport around the world. When you travel with a British accent around the world, the first question you get asked coming into a cab or talking to somebody, who do you support? Oh, I'm Man United. Oh, I'm Liverpool. I'm,
Always.
and you've always, and it's a great thing that I'm really pleased you had that idea and you went off and arranged that. It's a great thing to do. And who knows? I've always thought about this, right? If Israel were playing in the Asian World Cup qualifiers, where we should, not even in Qatar, because that's gone now. McTominay ruined that for us,
it looks that way.
He ruined it for us. But I was thinking we should be playing with the Asian, qualifiers. We shouldn't be in the European qualifiers. The only reason that we're in the Asian not in the Asian qualifiers, is that certain teams there wouldn't play us. Wouldn't it be great if one day? Yeah, we used to be. Yeah, it'd be great if we could go back. I mean, I think we would have a chance of actually qualifying for a big tournament if we were playing some of those teams.
If I'm not wrong, when Israel did qualify in 1970 for the World Cup, which is the only time they've ever qualified for a finals, I believe it was when they were in. Maybe I shouldn't be crazy. I think they were still in the Asia League, but I know for a fact what happened when they did get through to the finals. I know they drew. They had a famous draw with Sweden, and they also had a famous draw with Italy. But I think they then lost to Uruguay, so they got knocked out.
That's it. That's it. And there is talent out here, as you know, Matt. You know that we do have some good players, some very good young players. We have people playing in the Premier League, in the Scottish League, all around Europe. So there is definitely talent here. It's just about harnessing and growing the talent. Now, as a football
maybe
manager,
going into a different continent, and maybe it doesn't say that we
yeah,
can proceed.
yeah, that too. That will definitely help. That will definitely help. So, as a football manager yourself, how do you kind of see the progression of the Israeli team? Do you think there's any chance of seeing us in a final in this decade?
In this decade, I don't think so. I feel like Israel have one or two maximum special players every decade for the past 30 years or so, and they haven't had as special enough a team to do well since the early 70s. So I don't think we're there at the moment. I don't think we've got enough stars, but it will happen. It will happen in our lifetime, Amir. I'm pretty sure of it. We'll have once a generation comes around where we have like 4 or 5 stars, we'll qualify and Israel will make something happen. Maybe they'll host the 2030. They're talking about hosting 2030 games.
That's right. That's right. I did hear whispers of that. Fingers crossed that will go through. I'm just wondering about the facilities. Do we have the facilities to host something like that by ourselves at the moment?
Well, I don't know if it will be by ourselves. I think the idea was maybe that countries in the Middle East in our region come together, and it's in a few different countries, maybe as part of a peace initiative, which would be nice. But it's only talk at the moment. I'd love to say that we'll be there at a point in 9 years where that could happen, but realistically, with the situation it is right now, I mean, it doesn't look likely. But who knows what's going to happen in 9 years? Who knows? The problem is they have to decide. The problem is they have to decide for 2030 pretty soon, like in the next few years. So that's the issue.
I see, yeah, and like you said, who knows what will happen in the next 9 years? We've had a crazy couple of years, the past couple. So, really, I really hope things can progress onwards from the Abraham Accords, which have obviously been a huge success, to more peace initiatives. I read today about another one with the Comoros Islands maybe having a deal. Hopefully, deals with Oman will come soon, and eventually, and hopefully, with our local neighbors here, the Palestinians. I know we've tried, we've huffed and puffed, and Oslo and other offers have been made after that. But hopefully we will be able to get there with the right type of leadership and with more young people coming into politics with fresher ideas and new ideas. I did want to ask, because since for sure, me too. I wanted to ask, so you moved 3 years ago, so obviously you were here for the conflict, correct? In May, the Guardian of the Walls.
Yeah.
What was that like for you as an Oleh Hadash, and to suddenly be in the midst of war and rockets and lynchings, unfortunately, and all these kind of terrible things?
It was scary. I've never experienced it before. Especially night one, I was actually sat in this exact place in a Zoom room doing an interview, and the rocket started, and no one was sure if the rockets were going to happen. There was rumors of it, but no one expected what happened in terms of the amount. And I live with elderly neighbors, and I tried to help them upstairs. There's no bomb shelter where I live, so we were in a stairwell. And that was actually scary. I never really knew what to do in our building if the bombs hit. And when they said you just stand in the stairwell, I was actually a bit surprised. That whole couple of weeks was horrible. I actually made a video myself to help try and promote the idea of peace during that went a little bit viral.
Nice.
Got a few tens of thousands of views talking about ending. I called it "I Hate You," and the idea was that people would stop spreading hate on social media because people were spreading so much hate on social media. We saw what happened in the rest of the world, in the UK, America, everywhere against Jews. And yeah, it was. I went on the news as well. It was the first time I went on talk radio to talk about what was happening, and I've been back on that show every 3 weeks since to give an update.
Nice.
So yeah, it wasn't nice. It was horrible, but that's the reality. You know, when you move here, as you did when you moved back, that could always happen, and it probably will happen.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Unless we have a peace deal and a peace agreement and two peoples that are willing to put things aside and let bygones be bygones and move on to a better future, it can happen at any time, unfortunately. And I do love that campaign that you did, you know, to stop the hate on social media, because something that I felt from my side, Matt, is that this whole social media generation and uptick, you know, I kind of put it in the last 10 years, roughly, something like that. Maybe in the last 8 to 5 years, it's even intensified. And what I've seen from this conflict compared to other conflicts when I've been here is that it was a conflict on steroids. Like, the amount of impact that it had around the world, like you said, things going on in the UK, in America, all over Europe, and unfortunately here as well. Like, the amount of hate and the things I was seeing on social media, to me, were just really, really shocked. And I'm quite new to the whole Instagram thing. I only got it, you know, like a year and a half ago. So I was really, really shocked about it all. I mean, there were young girls burning Israeli flags, like, you know, toilet paper with Israeli flags, and then emojis of poo, and, you know, just things that are just horrific. And I was thinking to myself, do these people actually realize what they're doing, or are they absolutely clueless about what's going on and what they're actually doing and what they're propagating?
Well, I found it very difficult during that time, also because I became obsessed with staying on social media during especially those 2 weeks, to make sure I was like, and I follow both sides. So I make sure I follow all the main kind of Palestinian accounts that have a lot of, like, a few million followers, and TikTok kind of works with an algorithm. So obviously I'm staying on the page longer if it's something to do with Israel Palestine. So everything during that 2 weeks I got sent by TikTok was something to do with Israel Palestine. It was horrible to watch. But it also wasn't just the Palestinian side, it was the Israeli side. And the TikTok especially, I don't know if you're on it, but there was one viral video that kept going around by everyone, which was like this stupid dance where you picked a side between Israelis and Palestinians, and people were like, it was actually 2 viral videos where you basically picked a side. And I just don't think that helps anyone. I mean, I never think picking a side helps anyone. No. I've always said I'm pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. And if you pick a side, usually that's where the problem begins. Like, people like it. People like a black and white story. It's easier to digest. They don't like the gray, but there's a lot of gray. So that just didn't help at all. Everything that was going on social media with people spreading hate instead of a message of peace, just didn't help at all. One of the reasons I work for my boss, who is Nasai Yassin, otherwise known as Nas Daily, one of the reasons I love working with him especially is because he put out a message, even in all of that violence and the rockets and everything, he put out a message of peace. Israeli Arab Muslim guy who advocates for peace, always has a message of peace, and always talks about bringing the two sides together to try and have 2 states. And yeah, so it made me proud for him that he was my boss at the time and still is.
Definitely. And yeah, it would be great. I mean, if you work for him, we welcome him on the show with open arms here. It would be fantastic to have him on at some point to talk about some of the issues. And I've seen some of his videos over the years, and he does have such a good message of peace, and he doesn't have a hateful bone in his body. And like you said, we must be critical as well of the Palestinian side, but as well as our side as well. We need to be critical. When you have pure forms of hate and pure racism coming out of your own, you need to take care of that, and you need to educate, and you need to get people to see reason.
Yeah,
and I completely agree that. Yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, man, you carry on. I'll talk.
No, I was just thinking, there's not many people out there like yourself, Matt, that can be pro both people. Within Israeli society, a lot of people, they're not interested in what's going on with the Palestinians. They just want to better their own lives, not have to deal with all the political stuff, with all the hateful stuff, with the wars. They just want to get on and live their life. Same with the Palestinian side. And I do think it's a message that needs to get out there more. Like, if you want to support people living here in the Holy Land, Israelis and Palestinians alike, then you need to be pro both people, and you need to support both people, because we don't need more of your help. Oh, we support Israel. We're gonna, we only support Israel. If you're gonna support Israel, you can come and help and support the Palestinians as well. And if you're pro-Palestinian and you want to help the Palestinian people, realize that Israel and Jews are part of the story here in the Middle East, and this is our homeland and has been our homeland for thousands of years. And we play a huge part here. A lot of the issue that I see on social media, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that there's so much misinformation, falsehoods being propagated, and it takes time to dissect each one, unfortunately.
Yep. It's hard because I just, some of the accounts on social media have a lot to answer for. There's an account on Instagram called Eye on Palestine that have a few million followers, which I think is the main account. And they send people out, and they Instagram live a lot, and they send people out and take videos of things. They'll do a headline of Israeli forces attacking child, or Israeli forces attacking a woman, all the time. And there's so many other videos, you can't really see what's going on. It's not very clear. There's no context. It just always says Israeli forces attack. You'll never get the explanation of why the IDF or the Israeli police are maybe going into an area to arrest someone, or they'll never say the other person did something, right? It's just, but they have millions of followers, and so they're putting that out to people nonstop. And so all people see is hate. They're just saying Israel bad, Palestine good, poor Palestinians. And it's things like that on social media which is the most dangerous, because if you're fed that information constantly, then of course it's what you believe. Not everyone can look at things and think about it and think, right, well, what's maybe going on here? What's the context here? People don't think like that. But until people realize on both sides that you need to be pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian, then we're not going to get anywhere. People like us that are pro both, immediately many people on the Palestinian side will be like, well, won't even have a conversation with us, right? Oh, you're pro-Israel, we're not having a conversation. At the end of it, some people just see Israel as the land that should never have been created. They call us colonizers, which is a complete misrepresentation, doesn't actually make any sense.
Exactly.
They say that we stole people's houses, we took the land and kicked people out. And often when you try and have a conversation with any of these people that are extreme about anything that happened before 1948 or at most before 1920, they don't want to have the conversation. For them, that doesn't exist. That's not a time that exists. So
it's nitpicking at history. It's nitpicking at history, and it's choosing what you want to focus on. And I'm not aware of that account, Eye on Palestine, but I'm obviously aware of other videos and things that are propagated like that and do get out there. It's very, very tricky to get people to see the other side of it and to analyze. We did actually have a guest on from Malta who was very, very affected by these type of accounts, and who changed his perspective. He went from being completely pro-Palestine and hating Israelis and really despising them and basically being brainwashed into that, right? To coming around and seeing and understanding that there's two sides to a conflict, and both, have committed, evil acts or bad things to each other over the course of the 100-year conflict. And the thing that actually got him to kind of change his perspective, as we called the episode as well, changing perspectives, was he was flicking through Instagram and he just saw an Israeli dad playing football with his kid, doing something very simple. And then he was like, oh, okay, that they're just humans like everybody else, just trying to get on, just trying to raise their family, just trying to work, or whatever it is that you want to do. But unfortunately, it did take him quite a while to unravel all that kind of propaganda that he devoured and has went deep into his mind. So there is definitely a struggle there to be had to get people to see the light, if you like, which is exactly why
struggle.
Yeah,
it's a massive
really
struggle
is.
because you can't. It's so. I'll give you the greatest example that I had. Right, I went to Liverpool University.
Mm-hmm.
They had a motion in the student union to boycott Israel, Palestinian society. And the student union said, okay, what we'll do is the Jewish society can have a stall if they want to be against it, and the Palestinian society can have a stall and if they want to be pro it. And we'll see how many signatures it gets online. And we got there, and when I got there, I pretended that I was just a student and I wasn't with the Jewish society or with anyone. And the Jewish society are there trying to explain the conflict, right? They're trying to explain the complications, the grey. They're trying to explain the grey. You go over to the Palestinian society and I had a conversation with them, and they're doing the black and white, as I say, right? They've got an iPad in their hand, and they're asking people to sign the petition to boycott Israel because Israeli soldiers purposely target Palestinian children and try and shoot them in the eyes. That's their line.
Oh,
that's it. Now, if you're going past the two stalls, if you're going past the two stalls and one's got an iPad trying to get people to sign up to boycott Israel, and your line is as easy as Israelis kill Palestinian children, and our line is trying to explain the complications of what goes on in the region, then you got no hope. You got no hope, and that's why what you just said about the guy from Malta, it takes so long to unravel the propaganda, because it's so easy for people that decide it's okay to just lie and make Israel look bad with one line. So that is why, until people get that this situation is grey and not black and white, we won't get anywhere.
And I want to address that, because as an ex-IDF soldier, it's complete nonsense. When I hear things like that, I just think to myself, where are you getting your information, and B, what are you talking about? Just seriously, what are you talking about? We don't target children at all. That's not something that goes on. I just find it ridiculous, to be honest. And it's a shame. It's a shame that in places of education like the UK, that has such a rich history of education, Cambridge, Oxford, and all the other ones in between, to have that going on university campuses. And I'd like to share a quick story with you, because it is a university problem, right? Because I've got a friend who converted actually to Judaism. He's from Cornwall originally, a place with no Jews, never met a Jew in his life. And he actually moved up to London for university, and he went to SOAS. And I'm sure you're aware, SOAS, very, quite anti-Semitic institution, to be honest with you.
I've been there quite a few times at SOAS.
Sure. And my buddy, he actually, from seeing the anti-Israel, it got him interested in Judaism. So he started studying, started learning about the conflict, he started getting into Torah, and eventually he converted and made Aliyah to Israel, funnily enough, from seeing all the anti stuff. It kind of pushed him the other way. And great to have him with us. He's a lovely guy. I just don't get why universities are the places where this stuff is learned, where it's pushed. Apart from the UK, I know America has a huge problem with it as well on campuses. Why do you think it's going on specifically in these types of places?
When you say these type of places, do you mean university campuses, or do you mean
Yeah, in universities.
Yeah,
in universities. Why? Like, it's not your working class,
well,
or your baker, or your, it's not happening there.
I think that the problem is it's twofold. Number one, you do have a problem in faculty. There are Middle East departments and history departments, and there's so many situations where the professors are biased, and the vast majority of the time against Israel. A professor at Bristol just lost his job finally after years of upsetting Jewish students on campus and Israeli students on campus for what he was saying and how he was marking papers. That's one thing. And the other thing is, people turn up to university campus and there's a lot of causes, I should say, right? You go to a freshers fair, you have Black Lives Matter, you have the LGBT society, generally the minority societies, and for some reason they end up coming together, and the Palestinian society end up grouping with them. And so the Palestinian cause is seen as a cause that should be supported by the minority groups on campus. And so again, they're not usually so many in number, but they make a loud noise, and they do demonstrations on campus where they'll paint blood on themselves and be on the floor and do a demonstration like that to show what happens on what happens in Israel in their eyes to Palestinians. They have Israeli Apartheid Week, which is a week where they literally just spread hate about Israel and say that Israel's the worst place on earth. There's campaigns. If there's ever a problem in the region, campus is a cesspit. It's a nightmare. When I was at campus, the Palestinian Society at Birmingham University chalked the entire, with chalk that you use on a blackboard, or used to use on a blackboard, chalked the entire campus with sentences on the floor about how awful a place Israel is. So I mean, all these things put together, and again, like Liverpool, like I said to you, is a good example. It's very easy to just say Israel's the worst place on earth. They came along, colonial settlers, kicked out the original people that lived on the land, the native people, the indigenous, that's the word, the indigenous people to the land, which is ironic. Again, people don't like to talk about anything before 1948 or 1920. People have decided that Jews didn't live there. All these things, and when you put all those factors together that I just spoke about, you get this cesspit of hate on campus. SOAS is a bit of an exception. SOAS, of course, the School of Oriental and African Studies, otherwise known amongst most students as the School of Anti-Semitism, has many of their. It's a small campus. They have, I think, 8,000 students, and 5,000 of them or so are from the Middle East and Africa. And the simple maths is, unfortunately, the people from those countries are from countries where Israel isn't seen as a good thing. So that's why SOAS especially has a problem.
I see. Oh, well, it's great because you're educating me on all this, Matt, because I didn't actually go to university in the UK, so I don't have a clue about what actually happens on campus and what is like the root cause of it. And now that you've explained it seems a lot clearer in my mind at what's going on. And I'm just thinking, can education be a key to solving it? So once people understand that Jewish history in Israel goes back 4,000 years, and that the Jewish presence in Israel never left actually the land at all. You still had Jews living in Hebron, in Tiberias, in Tzfat, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And even, after the Great Revolt in 70 AD, where the Romans came out and did kick out most of the Jews into the diaspora, Jewish life went on well into the Byzantine era and well into the Crusader era, the Mamluk era, and then on to the Ottoman era as well. Do you think education can be a key to getting people to understand that Jews are part of the Middle East, always have been? Even if you look in the Quran, Muhammad had links with Jews that were living in Saudi Arabia. Many of the Olim to Israel, the early state Olim, came from places like my family, Syria, Morocco, Yemen, Libya, Algeria, Lebanon. How can we
I
do
think
that?
Education does help. I think in terms of people that live here, I think education will help the rest of the world understand. Let's be honest, there's plenty of people posting about Palestine and Israel that have no clue really of the history or what's going on at all. They've read some infographics, they've seen that their celebrities maybe support Palestine and have gone with it. And infographics that try and explain 100-year conflict and the people's history of 3,000 years within one picture is never going to cut it. I did a 2-year course to become a tour guide in Israel and learn from the beginning to the end. I mean, it took 2 years and I still don't know everything. Okay, and I still don't understand everything that happened. So it's hard.
Sure.
It's not easy. I guess from a Palestinian point of view, I've always felt like this. If you're from 1948, if you were a kid in 1948 and you're alive today, right? And you're now a grandparent, you're in your 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, right? 90s. You're telling your children and your grandchildren that in 1948, you got kicked out your home and lost the keys to your home. And you hope one day they'll get it back. You hope one day your children, your children's children get it back. I think there is a big issue. And I've always understood from that point of view, yeah, there were some towns and there were some cities where people lost their homes and that stayed with them forever. Okay, that has stayed with them forever and since. For that reason, I don't believe that there will be true peace between Israel and the Palestinians until maybe me and you are grandparents. Because I think enough time needs to pass since 1948. And unfortunately, a couple of generations of people that are too close to that time need to not be here anymore for people of the third, fourth, fifth generation to be like, okay, enough. We need to move forward now and not look back. And we need to make peace with our neighbors and try and live together side by side. And maybe it won't be where my great grandparents were from, but it will be close to it, it will be next to it. Once we get to that stage, we can make peace. But while we're still too close to 1948 and people from that era are still alive, I think it's very hard for the grandchildren or the children of those grandparents and great grandparents to go to the Israelis and actually make a peace deal. And I think that's the problem Yasser Arafat had. I think it's the problem the current Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian people, has. I don't think they can do it.
Sure. I agree with the sentiment, and I do think that that is a huge problem. My only pushback, Matt, would be that what about the people that have been traumatized from the recent conflicts? Let's go back to the first Lebanese war, 82, and then after that, the second Lebanese war, all the Gaza conflicts, and on the Palestinian side, you seeing your compatriots being killed by Israeli forces. Isn't that level of radicalization going to stay even for more generations? Shouldn't we get to a point where we're like, okay, let's deal with each problem we have now, and let's try and push for peace within the next generation or two as quick as possible?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I would also say there's a lot of groups of people that have lost. We've lost in terrorist attacks. It's 1,712, I think, or something around the 1,700 number for Israel. Yeah. There's so many parents of children that have come out. They never come out in their masses and have said they now want to go and get revenge. You see very often families that have been affected by deaths in their family from terrorist attacks saying all they really want is peace. If they could get peace tomorrow, they would. So my pushback, I guess, to that would be, just because there's been violence in recent years doesn't mean we should be further away from peace, in one sense. But that wasn't completely what you were saying, and I understand what you were saying. I think that 1948 is, as they called it, the Nakba. That is the big catastrophe. We can talk about what happened in Gaza in 2008, 2014, okay? And that was bad. And people lost their homes, but they didn't have to move out an area, okay? Even the Lebanon war, it's with Lebanon. It's not with the Palestinians as such. The Palestinians' big movement and loss of home and loss of city was 1948 and 1967. And even in 1967, most of the areas kept their areas and were able to stay where they were, especially compared to 1948. So I think 1948 is called the Nakba because it was the biggest catastrophe, and I don't think anything since has come close. And I think that is the root of the problem.
I see. I get where you're coming from completely there, Matt. And yeah, 67 obviously and 73 involved other Arab armies. And, we do have peace deals with Egypt and Jordan. We played a part in those, and those deals have bared fruit, right? They've lasted well into a few decades now. You could say that some of them are a bit of a cold peace, and relations need to be warmed up. But they have been a success in general. And I think that eventually Israelis and Palestinians will come to some type of agreement, and peace will come about. And it's a recurring theme on our podcast, but the British and the Irish, they were at war for hundreds of years. We're not talking just 100, we're talking hundreds of years. 150 years ago, Irish people were starved en masse by the British. And nowadays, you have economic ties, you have a peace deal, you have people flying, cultural exchange, and in general, everything is all good. Sure, will there be some racists on each side? Definitely. You're always going to have that. But it's about having an agreement and a deal on a governmental level which can maintain for a long period of time. That's the main goal.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Israel have proven that they'll exchange land for peace. They gave back the Sinai to make peace with Egypt in 1978, 79. They made peace with Jordan, and there was exchange of land there and a deal with the water. They tried to make peace with Syria, but Israel wasn't so willing to give back the Golan Heights for understandable reason. And I think in hindsight, thank God they didn't, when it looked like it was close to being handed over. I'm glad now, with everything that's happened in Syria, that we didn't give back the Golan Heights. Otherwise, we'd have ISIS above us on our doorstep, potentially. And with the Palestinians, I guess the difference is, while we have offered land for peace to the Palestinians, but there's still, like I said, there's still not the acceptance that there's certain areas in Israel that Palestinians lived in a majority. Let's take Ramla as an example, which Israel aren't going to give back Ramla to the Palestinians, right? It's bang center in the middle of Israel. It's not a place that's going to go back. So all the Palestinians that lost their homes in Ramla aren't going to get back Ramla. I guess that's where this is different to all the peace deals we could or have made with our neighboring countries. There will have to be land swaps. And there could be land swaps. There's no reason. There's also no reason in theory, by the way, why every settlement, what is called a settlement in the West Bank, the people that live there can't just become Jewish citizens of a Palestinian state, just like we have a 20% Arab citizens of an Israeli state. There should be no issue with that in reality. It's only because when the Palestinians talk about a two-state solution, they automatically, for some reason, talk about it being Jew-free.
Yeah,
which exactly. I find bizarre. So, I mean, whether or not the people that live in the West Bank in those settlements would actually stay and want to stay is another question. But in theory, if there was going to be peace, it shouldn't matter. So there's all sorts of things you can do. They were going to do a land bridge between. They were going to do the big bridge between Gaza and the West Bank in 2005. Israel, of course, pulled out of Gaza in 2005, gave back land, hopefully peace, but we didn't get peace. We got Hamas. So we've proven that we can do it, but we need right now a willing partner. But with everything we've spoken about, will we have a willing partner?
That's the good question. That's the good question. And that's a question for another episode. Unfortunately, we can go into that. And I think you're right, though, Matt. It takes two to tango at the end of the day. And I don't even think we have one to tango at the moment with the current government and the current state of the Palestinians being so divided within themselves. As much as Israelis and Jews are divided at the moment, the Palestinians are just as divided with the PA, with Hamas. So yeah, it doesn't look on the horizon, but we will keep pushing. We'll keep doing what we do here on the podcast. We'll try to get more Israelis and Palestinians together for discussions and see how people feel, and how we can affect things on the ground. And some of the best ways is just charity, getting people together. The Home is a great charity where they get Israelis and Palestinians together to clean up a little bit of the land. We've had Inon on before. Fantastic way. So anyone listening that is not Israeli or Palestinian wants to get involved, have a look at some people that are here doing things together, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together. Just before I let you go, Matt, I did want to just quickly ask you about Inter Aliyah, your football team that you manage, right? I think it's great having a team for Olim. I only found out about you guys a couple of years ago. So just a quick brief word on what you do there.
Yeah, Inter Aliyah was a team set up by my good friend Sam and also a guy called Ricky. And the idea was 5 years ago was to set up a team for new Olim because there wasn't a team for them. And there's teams with, all Russians or all Armenians or all Moldovans, all Sudanese, but there was no mixed team for Olim. So they set it up with the idea that they would have a team in the National Israeli League, and we have three football teams and one basketball team. The basketball team's new; they've just launched, and one of the football teams is in League Gimel, which is the 5th tier of Israeli football, looking hopefully to get promoted this year. And then we have two other teams who play in the Olim League, and that is full of teams basically made up of teams, like I said, a French team, a Russian team, etc. So we're kind of the mixed team, and it's really lovely. It's really nice. It's a great community. It brings people together. I wish we had better results than we have had recently, but we will hopefully do better soon. So anyone that's listening that's in the Tel Aviv area or near that wants to play, we do tournaments and we have games, so all are welcome. We also have a women's team by the way too.
Nice, fantastic, and I wish you all the best. In your promotion campaign, trying to get up there into Liga Leumit and eventually Liga Tal. I want to see you guys. Battling the big boys.
The dream.
That battling the big boys. That's where I want to see you guys. So Matt, it's been a real pleasure hosting you, my friend. You're welcome back on anytime. Really great discussion, and
cheers, man.
Wish you all the best for the coming week, and hopefully get some good results for Inter Aliyah and of course for Tottenham as well.
I hope so. Always happy to come back. And also, if you ever have a guest on that's a Palestinian or a voice from a different perspective or different, I'm happy to come on together with them and have a discussion and a debate with you as well, anytime.
That would be brilliant. That would be brilliant. We are currently looking for some more guests, some more Palestinian guests. So I'll definitely keep you informed on that, Matt, for sure.
Cheers, Amir.
Definitely. So thanks very much for all our viewers. Thanks for joining us for tonight's discussion, and wishing everyone a good week. Take it easy, guys.
Cool. Cheers, man.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.